Have you ever wondered how fragile trust really is? Where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? Because right now, you're about to step into a story where love was only a mask, and betrayal hid behind every smile. Emma had always believed in the life she built with Alex, her husband of 8 years, thinking that their marriage was flawless, untouchable, the kind of love story everyone envied. Their house stood like a fortress on the hill, filled with expensive furniture, abstract paintings that whispered sophistication, and the hum of a city that never slept below their windows. But the quiet elegance was a cage. The silence wasn't comfort. It was a warning she chose not to hear until one rainy Thursday changed everything. She had come home early from work, pretending to be exhausted from meetings she didn't really have, craving solitude after another week of politely smiling at her colleagues who envied her charm and beauty. The front door was slightly ajar, and at first, she thought she had forgotten to lock it, but then she noticed the faint aroma of cologne that wasn't his clean, sharp, foreign. Her heart skipped, her stomach twisted, and a cold knot of fear crept up her spine. Inside, she found Alex in the living room, his expression frozen when he realized she was there, sitting on the edge of a plush velvet couch that felt suddenly suffocating. He tried to speak, but Emma didn't give him the chance. The sight of him with another woman, a stranger smiling too icily, laughing too loudly, ripped through her like a knife she hadn't known she possessed. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she simply stood there, her mind collecting every detail, the curve of the woman's lips as she whispered into Alex's ear, the way his hand rested on her thigh as if claiming territory that was never his to claim. The rain outside intensified, the drops hammering against the windows like the pulse of her newfound anger. Emma stepped closer, and the woman looked up, startled, expecting perhaps a confrontation of tears or yelling, but Emma's gaze was calm, icy, calculating, the kind that makes people uncomfortable without a word. "Go," she said, and the stranger bolted, leaving Alex alone with the echo of his mistakes and the storm that mirrored the chaos now consuming Emma's mind. For the next hour, they sat in silence, the rain drumming a rhythm that matched her thoughts, each beat igniting the fire of a plan she hadn't yet fully formed but already knew she would execute with precision. She had always been underestimated, her kindness mistaken for weakness, her patience taken for granted. But the betrayal lit something in her, a side Alex had never seen, a shadow that had waited for the right moment to emerge. Over the next few days, she watched him carefully, noting his routines, his phone habits, the subtle ways he thought he was untouchable. She laughed quietly to herself when she saw him checking his reflection in the mirror, unaware that the woman he betrayed was already planning the collapse of the perfect life he took for granted. Emma began small, testing boundaries, observing reactions. She found out that Alex had a secret offshore account, one that funded more than just their lifestyle extravagant trips, secret investments, and, most importantly, funds for the other woman's apartment in the city. She traced every wire transfer, memorized every date, and began weaving her own network of information, not in a rush, but in a patient, meticulous way that made her invisible to him. Everyone around Alex continued to see the charming, confident man, the successful husband, the provider. Only Emma knew the cracks hidden beneath that polished exterior. She started planting subtle doubts among his colleagues, hints that nothing was as perfect as it seemed. Alex, blinded by his arrogance, laughed off the tiny disruptions, never realizing that each small move by Emma was a deliberate brick in the foundation of his undoing. Nights became her canvas. She studied his habits like an artist observing the imperfections in a masterpiece. She learned when he left his phone unattended, when his temper softened after wine, when his ego made him predictable, and she smiled silently, imagining the day when every secret he held would explode in front of him, leaving him vulnerable, stripped of power. Friends who had once complimented Emma on her devotion now watched in awe as her transformation went unnoticed, her quiet exterior hiding the storm that churned within. Then came the first breakthrough, a misplaced document Alex carelessly left on his desk, detailing not just financial indiscretions but a web of lies that implicated everyone in their social circle. Emma photocopied it, memorized it, and filed it away in her mind, knowing the right moment would make the revelation devastating. She began manipulating small scenarios, introducing Alex's colleagues to subtle truths, nudging conversations to expose his deceit without directly accusing him. The tension in their home grew, though Alex remained oblivious, dismissing every raised eyebrow, every knowing glance, as coincidence. Emma's power grew in silence. Her actions were invisible, her revenge surgical. One evening, she attended a charity gala with Alex, smiling at acquaintances who praised their union, while she internally catalogued every slip, every detail that would later make the man she once loved crumble. She discovered that Alex had been using one of their friends as a messenger, a secret that, when revealed, would shatter trust across their social circle. Emma's mind raced, not with anger but with a precise blueprint for ruin. a meticulous sequence that would leave Alex questioning every relationship he valued. Days turned into weeks, each moment layered with her strategy. She learned to use his arrogance against him, exploiting his assumptions that she was too fragile, too emotional, to act decisively. Every lie he told, every betrayal he committed, became another thread she could pull to unravel him. And then the personal stakes escalated. Alex attempted to gaslight her, claiming she was imagining things, accusing her of paranoia. Emma didn't react immediately. She let his words sink in, knowing that his underestimation was a weapon she could wield. She began recording their interactions subtly, capturing admissions that would later serve as undeniable proof of his duplicity. The household, once a symbol of their shared love, now felt like a stage for the performance of her silent revenge. The furniture, the art, even the lighting became part of the narrative she was constructing, scenes where Alex unknowingly acted out his own undoing. Emma meticulously organized dinners, casual visits from friends, and social gatherings where she carefully orchestrated revelations, planting seeds that would grow into doubt and mistrust among those closest to him. She created situations where Alex's dishonesty was unavoidable, a truth reflected in the eyes of friends, colleagues, and ultimately, herself. And throughout it all, she maintained the appearance of the devoted wife, the loving partner, the woman who forgave too easily, until the moment arrived when forgiveness was no longer necessary because the truth itself would become her instrument of power. As the weeks passed, Alex's confidence began to crack in ways he couldn't understand. He found himself alone. In moments he expected companionship, doubting conversations that had always seemed innocuous. Emma's silence became louder than any accusation, her calm more terrifying than any confrontation. And in that stillness, she watched, calculating, planning the precise moment to strike, knowing that when it happened, the consequences would ripple outward in waves he could never contain. The rain returned one night, tapping against the windows, mirroring the rhythm of her plotting mind. She sipped wine alone in the dimly lit kitchen, the city lights casting long shadows across her face, reflecting a determination that had grown stronger than the love she had once felt. Every secret Alex thought buried was now an open book in her mind, ready to be read aloud in a way that would leave him exposed, humiliated, and powerless. And in that moment, Emma smiled not with joy, but with the quiet satisfaction of a storm, patiently waiting to release its fury. She wasn't just preparing revenge, she was rewriting the narrative of their lives, and nothing Alex had ever known would survive the unveiling of truth. Alex thought he had seen the worst of Emma's reactions, that her quiet composure was simply the extension of his control over her life, but that assumption became his blind spot, a weakness she used with precision. He returned from a business trip, smug, expecting the warmth of home, a soft smile, and the effortless admiration he had taken for granted. Instead, he found Emma in the library, the heavy velvet curtains drawn, the room lit only by a solitary lamp that cast long shadows across the rows of books. She didn't greet him, didn't ask about his day, didn't even acknowledge his presence beyond the faint lift of her eyes that weighed him silently, like a jury observing a defendant they already knew was guilty. His confidence wavered slightly, and Emma noticed the tiny crease of unease forming on his forehead, a small victory that felt monumental. Over the next several days, she escalated her subtle psychological pressure, creating scenarios that forced Alex to confront consequences he had never imagined. Invitations to social events arrived, but Emma sent contradictory messages, sometimes confirming, sometimes quietly canceling, leaving him scrambling to maintain appearances, a man slowly losing his grip on the life he thought he mastered. She engineered accidental encounters, friends casually mentioning things Alex had said, rumors she seeded without being seen, all designed to gnaw at his composure until paranoia crept into his veins. Emma didn't stop there. She began manipulating finances with meticulous precision, redirecting small amounts from their shared accounts, just enough to cause confusion and stress without immediate suspicion. Bills appeared late, payments bounced, a minor chaos Alex never anticipated from the woman he had assumed submissive. At night, she would sit in the shadows, watching him fume silently, drinking wine slowly, savoring the rise of panic in his eyes when he realized the control he wielded was slipping, imperceptibly at first, then alarmingly fast. And then, Emma struck deeper, hitting him where it hurt most: reputation. She reached out to one of his closest colleagues, a man Alex trusted implicitly, and whispered hints of mismanagement, of secret indiscretions, of moments Alex thought hidden. The colleague began noticing discrepancies, small but undeniable, and Alex, blind in his arrogance, dismissed concerns until they became impossible to ignore. Emma's strategy wasn't about exposing herself as the avenger, it was about using his ego, his mistakes, and the very web of lies he spun to unravel him without lifting a finger herself. One evening, she invited him to dinner at a high-end restaurant, the kind he adored for its exclusivity. As they sat, she casually mentioned a friend who had asked after him. subtly including details only someone observant, someone who knew more than she could possibly know. Alex laughed nervously, attempting to play it off, but the seed of doubt was planted. The waiter brought the wine, a vintage Alex had once bragged about, and Emma raised her glass, smiling, and said nothing else, letting silence do what words could not. Over time, Alex began to notice patterns in her behavior he hadn't seen before: the quiet way she listened, the faint smirk when he assumed she wasn't paying attention, the precision of her timing in conversation. Every slight, every overlooked detail became a tool in her arsenal. Emma started documenting his actions, taking notes in subtle ways, even recording conversations when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She knew the value of evidence, the power of proof, and she used it like a scalpel, cutting away at his confidence, his credibility, and the trust he had built around himself. She manipulated moments to create tension among his business partners, suggesting alternative perspectives, subtly questioning decisions, making Alex defensive without ever openly confronting him. He began losing sleep, second-guessing himself, snapping at colleagues, his charm tarnishing under the weight of the invisible pressure Emma exerted. And then came the personal attack, a move calculated to pierce his core. She reached out to the woman he had betrayed, not with vengeance, but with a strategic alliance, ensuring the other woman's movements aligned with Emma's plan to expose Alex. The two women, each aware of the other's role in the unfolding drama, became silent instruments of a revenge far more sophisticated than Alex could imagine. Emma orchestrated situations where Alex's indiscretions would be caught on camera or overheard by key people, always staying a step ahead, her patience unwavering. She knew the exact moment to escalate, the precise time when the combination of his arrogance and her planning would produce maximum impact. Days merged into nights of subtle warfare, Emma watching, calculating, and Alex, increasingly paranoid, never realizing he was the protagonist in a trap designed by someone he had underestimated entirely. Friends began commenting on changes in him, noting irritability, stress, and subtle paranoia, all of which Emma silently confirmed with a knowing smile, always remaining the composed, innocent partner in the eyes of the world. And while Alex flailed, trying to regain control, Emma uncovered secrets he hadn't even realized she could access: emails, hidden accounts, and private conversations with business partners that revealed a pattern of deceit he believed buried forever. Using these, she carefully introduced doubt into his most important relationships, making allies question loyalty, forcing him to justify lies, and creating fissures that widened each day. Emma's revenge was not loud, not dramatic, but surgical, a psychological dismantling executed with quiet brilliance. One Sunday, she invited him to a brunch, ensuring mutual friends were present. Between bites and polite conversation, she casually mentioned a charitable contribution he claimed to make, detailing amounts he had diverted for personal gain. Alex stammered, caught off guard, while the friends around him exchanged subtle glances that didn't need explanation. Later, she revealed to a business associate a critical piece of evidence Alex believed secure, and suddenly, a thread pulled so tightly that the fabric of his carefully curated life began to unravel. Panic replaced his arrogance, and for the first time, he realized he was no longer in control. Emma's calculated patience had transformed into momentum, the slow accumulation of pressure now unstoppable. He tried to regain authority at home, attempting to assert dominance, but Emma met every effort with calm deflection, a quiet confidence that made confrontation meaningless. Nights became tense, words unspoken but weighted, glances sharp enough to cut, each silence a reminder of her invisible power. Then came the public exposure, small but devastating. A business partner, tipped by Emma, began questioning Alex during a casual dinner meeting, bringing up discrepancies that forced him to defend himself in front of peers. His excuses faltered, explanations fell short, and Emma observed, her calm smile unshaken, as his reputation teetered on the brink. Alex became obsessed with finding the source of this erosion, unaware that the woman he had tried to control was orchestrating every move from the shadows. He checked phones, emails, and meetings, believing the threat external. But Emma had made herself invisible, her revenge indistinguishable from coincidence, luck, or fate. The emotional toll on him grew. Insomnia replaced nights once spent in arrogance, and tension became constant, suffocating him slowly. Emma, meanwhile, cultivated a semblance of normalcy, always composed, always supportive in appearance. While the cracks widened in Alex's life, one evening, she invited him to a gala with key investors, carefully ensuring that each conversation he had would reinforce his instability in the eyes of those who mattered most. His nervousness, once invisible, now flickered in micro-expressions Emma had studied and memorized, signals she could exploit to maximum effect. Every move, every lie he had believed hidden, became ammunition she could wield without confrontation. The final piece was social. Emma introduced subtle rumors among high-profile friends, planting doubts about his fidelity and competence, ensuring that even those closest to him would question the man he had been confident enough to betray. Alex's frustration boiled over at home, leading to arguments that appeared natural. The friction unnoticed is part of normal marital tension by anyone observing casually, but Emma knew every spark was intentional, every reaction precisely engineered, and through it all, she maintained her composure, her outward patience and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos she unleashed quietly. Each day, each week, each orchestrated event drew Alex further into a psychological trap he could not escape, the web around him tightening invisibly. Emma's revenge was no longer theoretical. It was kinetic, moving, alive, a force that would culminate in a complete dismantling of his life, career, and relationships, all executed with the precision of a master strategist who never allowed emotion to compromise logic. She watched, waited, and smiled, knowing that the storm she had nurtured for months was on the cusp of breaking. And when it did, there would be no recovery, no redemption, only the devastating consequences of underestimating the woman who once loved him blindly but now controlled his destiny entirely. Alex had begun noticing the world shifting beneath his feet, though he still clung to the illusion of power, not realizing that every smile, every gesture, every carefully measured word from Emma was a calculated step toward his complete undoing. The house, once his sanctuary, now felt alien, every corner a reminder of a game he didn't understand he was losing. Emma had subtly changed everything around him: the lighting, the furniture arrangement, even the placement of objects on his desk, creating an environment that unsettled him just enough to question his perception without ever revealing the source. He awoke at night, heart racing, feeling watched, hearing faint sounds he couldn't place, a psychological pressure he blamed on stress and paranoia, never realizing it was her invisible design. Meanwhile, Emma's moves became bolder. She orchestrated situations where Alex's colleagues noticed inconsistencies in his statements, where friends caught him in contradictions, where investors subtly questioned his judgment, all while maintaining the image of the supportive wife who stood by quietly, a mask of innocence that made every accusation against him seem implausible. She discovered that he had begun speaking to a private investigator, trying desperately to uncover the source of his unraveling, but Emma anticipated every step. She diverted, misled, and manipulated every trail, leaving Alex frustrated, exhausted, and increasingly unstable, as if the walls of his perfect life were closing in without him knowing who or what was responsible. One evening, at a dinner meant to celebrate a lucrative business deal, Emma casually brought up minor financial discrepancies Alex had overlooked, small enough to seem accidental, but precise enough to erode the trust of everyone around the table. He laughed, nervously, attempting charm and confidence, but every word he uttered was met with subtle looks from his peers, each one questioning, each one skeptical, until the room's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly into tension that he could neither explain nor control. That night, he returned home, his ego bruised, his mind racing, and Emma welcomed him with calm composure, asking innocuous questions, as if nothing had happened, the very presence of normalcy making his unraveling all the more painful. The following weeks saw her escalate the psychological manipulation further. She sent anonymous tips to business partners, subtly highlighted errors in documents he submitted, and began leaving notes in places he would find them, notes that questioned his judgment, suggested that he was forgetting things, or hinted at betrayals he had never imagined. Alex's mind, once confident and clear, became a maze of suspicion and doubt, where every interaction required calculation and caution, and yet Emma remained the calm center, the eye of the storm, smiling politely while the chaos she created swirled around him, and the brilliance of her plan lay in its invisibility. No one saw Emma as a threat because she appeared too fragile, too kind, too devoted, a perception Alex had used to justify his deceit, and which now blinded him to the precision of her strategy. She even orchestrated encounters where the woman he had betrayed appeared in social situations he could not avoid, always in indirect ways that forced him to question what he knew, always in ways that ensured his embarrassment was private but deeply felt. Alex's paranoia grew. He began checking phones obsessively, monitoring emails, even questioning friends he once trusted, but Emma anticipated each move. She planted distractions, created false leads, and ensured that he spent more energy searching for threats than defending himself against the real one standing right beside him. And then, Emma escalated further, targeting his most vulnerable point, his pride. She started revealing minor truths to friends, truths he thought safe, selectively exposing him as flawed, inconsistent, and unreliable, ensuring that whispers reached the right ears, but always carefully balanced so that he could not accuse her without appearing delusional. Alex began losing weight, losing sleep, losing the ease and charm that had once defined him. Every day, he woke more exhausted, more uncertain, The man who once controlled everything, now caught in a psychological trap of his own making, crafted silently by the woman he had thought submissive. Emma used every tool at her disposal, including technology, surveillance, social engineering, and human manipulation, to construct an environment where Alex felt trapped, isolated, and constantly questioned. She knew the precise balance between fear, doubt, and curiosity that would maximize his stress while maintaining her image. At home, she subtly rearranged routines, leaving small clues that suggested surveillance, notes that hinted at her omnipresence, and conversations that seemed accidental but were strategically loaded to trigger paranoia. Alex could not escape. Every corner of his life, every relationship, every habit was observed and subtly manipulated. Then came the breakthrough, the moment where the dominoes would start to fall in rapid succession. Emma orchestrated a meeting with key investors, pretending to seek advice for a joint venture, while subtly presenting evidence of mismanagement, all anonymized but precise enough to be traced back to him in perception. The investors questioned his competence, his reliability, his integrity, and Alex could only stammer, unaware that the real mastermind was watching from the shadows, her calm demeanor masking the satisfaction of victory. She continued to push, orchestrating subtle social confrontations, leaving him isolated from friends, planting seeds of doubt that blossomed into full-blown mistrust. Even those who once admired him began noticing cracks, not realizing that Emma's patient planning had created a reality where his own lies, his own betrayals, were turned against him. One night, Emma arranged for a casual dinner at home with friends who were also Alex's business associates. She allowed him to boast, to exaggerate, to attempt charm, and then gently introduced contradictions, details only she could know, forcing him to defend himself repeatedly. By the end of the evening, he was exhausted, flustered, and humiliated, while Emma appeared composed, supportive, the perfect wife everyone assumed still loved him unconditionally. The next week, she leaked a carefully curated selection of emails to one of his trusted partners, highlighting financial mismanagement and questionable decisions. The partner confronted Alex, and in that confrontation, the full weight of Emma's strategy hit him. He realized that she had been watching, recording, manipulating, and predicting his every move, her patience unmatched, her intelligence lethal. He attempted to confront her, to accuse, to demand explanations, but Emma remained unflappable, each word measured, each reaction calculated to leave him doubting himself. She allowed him to spiral, to overreact, to make mistakes, all while maintaining the facade of innocence and devotion. Alex began to experience moments of sheer terror, imagining betrayals that did not exist, fearing exposure in areas that were already under her control, and losing his grip on both home and work life. Emma's revenge had entered a psychological phase that he could neither anticipate nor counteract. She was no longer merely retaliating. She was reconstructing reality around him, turning every belief, every confidence, every assumption he had about the world into doubt. And while he unraveled, Emma continued her meticulous surveillance, her patience allowing her to escalate the impact gradually, ensuring maximum destruction when the moment of revelation arrived. One day, she arranged for a small social gathering, inviting friends and colleagues, ensuring that every conversation would subtly highlight Alex's failures, missteps, and lies. She allowed him to speak, to reveal himself, and watched as the carefully orchestrated narrative unfolded, each reaction perfectly timed, each embarrassment amplified without a single accusation from her. Alex was collapsing under the weight of his own mistakes Emma had turned into weapons. He no longer trusted himself, no longer trusted the world, no longer trusted the woman he had betrayed. Emma, however, moved through the chaos like a shadow, her quiet smile the calm at the center of the storm she created. And finally, the personal confrontation arrived. She confronted him not with anger, not with tears, but with cold, factual evidence of every betrayal, every lie, every attempt to manipulate, all documented, all undeniable. Alex's arrogance shattered in that moment. The man who thought himself untouchable now realized he was at the mercy of the woman he had deceived, manipulated, and underestimated. Emma's revenge was no longer subtle. It was complete, a psychological, social, and emotional dismantling of a man who had thought himself invincible, executed with patience, precision, and brilliance. And as she stood over him, calm, composed, victorious, Alex understood in a way he never could have imagined. The quietest person, the one who seemed the most devoted, can also be the most dangerous. Every plan, every secret, every lie he had used to manipulate the world was now reflected back at him, amplified by the very woman he had believed powerless, and the realization was absolute. Nothing would ever be the same again. Alex woke one morning feeling the weight of a life unraveling faster than he could comprehend. The house silent around him, every familiar object now a reminder of betrayal he hadn't fully grasped until now. Emma moved through the morning with the same composure she always had. the soft hum of her movements and the measured precision in her voice masking the storm she had cultivated for months. And as he watched her, a creeping fear settled in his chest, a cold, insidious realization that the woman he had dismissed, the partner he had thought loyal, had been orchestrating his destruction from the shadows, turning every secret, every misstep, every betrayal into instruments of revenge, while he, blinded by arrogance and entitlement, had failed to notice the growing web around him, a web whose threads he himself had spun with deceit and carelessness. That morning, she casually mentioned a minor discrepancy in the household accounts, something he initially brushed off, but as the day unfolded, he discovered that multiple transactions had been traced, manipulated, and documented, a silent audit revealing not just his financial misdeeds, but also evidence of the affair, hidden investments, and countless lies that had once been invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. And Alex, feeling the first pangs of panic, began to frantically piece together how this could have happened, never once realizing that every move he made, every desperate check, every frantic call, was anticipated, recorded, and transformed into additional ammunition for Emma's meticulous plan. Over the next few days, she escalated further, subtly encouraging friends to question his decisions, leaving carefully placed documents and notes that would catch his attention and force him to confront the impossibility of the explanations he had previously relied on. And each encounter, each moment, was designed not to reveal her hand but to intensify the collapse of the world he thought was under his control. Alex began to show cracks, snapping at minor inconveniences, lashing out at colleagues, even questioning longtime friends and business partners, all while Emma maintained her calm, her demeanor unshaken, always supportive when needed, always observing the precise reaction she had engineered. And in the privacy of their home, she allowed him to spiral further, never offering solace, never giving him a sense of victory, letting the weight of guilt, paranoia, and social isolation crush him incrementally. She orchestrated encounters with people he had previously considered allies, carefully planting doubts, questions, and innuendos that forced him to defend himself repeatedly, while she appeared as the ever-patient wife, an image that made him doubt not only the world around him, but also his ability to discern reality from perception. The brilliance of her strategy lay in invisibility, in the manipulation of perception rather than overt confrontation, and as Alex became increasingly desperate, Emma began pushing the boundaries even further, arranging situations where his own mistakes were exposed in public settings, where witnesses noted inconsistencies, and where every lie he had relied upon became a weapon against him, all while she sat quietly, observing, noting reactions, and calculating the next step in a plan that had been months in the making. One evening, she staged a dinner with key social acquaintances and business associates, ensuring that every topic of conversation subtly highlighted Alex's failures, financial mismanagement, and moral compromises. And as he stumbled through explanations, caught in the crossfire of truths and half-truths, Emma allowed a subtle, knowing smile to grace her lips, a smile that reflected satisfaction but revealed nothing, a smile that masked the full force of the storm she was about to unleash. In parallel, she contacted the woman from his affair, not to seek revenge and anger, but to coordinate the final act of exposure, turning the other woman's knowledge into a strategic tool, ensuring that every secret Alex believed hidden would surface at the most damaging moments, timing revelations to maximize impact, and forcing him to face humiliation, betrayal, and social ostracization simultaneously, a perfect storm engineered to dismantle not only his professional standing, but also his personal identity. Over the weeks, Alex's mental state deteriorated. Sleepless nights replaced arrogant confidence, paranoia replaced charm, and every interaction became a potential minefield, with Emma orchestrating the explosions while remaining invisible, untouchable, the calm eye around which chaos revolved. She intercepted calls, redirected messages, subtly manipulated communications, and even engineered accidental meetings that ensured he would confront truths he had tried to bury while maintaining the facade of support and concern. A masterful duality that left him questioning not only his circumstances, but his own judgment and memory. The final sequences of her plan involved direct confrontation in controlled settings. She arranged for Alex's colleagues, friends, and business associates to observe behaviors, documents, and evidence that collectively painted a picture of incompetence, deceit, and betrayal so vivid that even his most loyal allies could not ignore it, and she allowed the revelations to unfold gradually, forcing Alex to stumble from one embarrassment to the next, each more devastating than the last, with Emma always present but never openly accusatory, a silent executioner of his downfall. And then came the moment that ensured irreversible collapse. Emma exposed the affair, not through anger but with calm precision, timing disclosures so that they coincided with financial discrepancies and professional failures, creating a perfect storm where Alex's personal, social, and professional worlds collided violently. leaving him defenseless, humiliated, and fully aware of the depth of underestimation he had allowed. Realizing too late that every assumption, every manipulation, every attempt to control had been anticipated, documented, and weaponized against him, he attempted to regain control, desperate, frantic, accusing Emma of fabrication, manipulation, and even madness, but she remained composed, revealing only what was necessary, presenting evidence that was irrefutable, precise, and devastating. And as the walls closed in, Alex understood in a terrifying clarity that the woman he had betrayed and underestimated was the architect of his ruin, and that nothing, no charm, no wealth, no influence could save him from the consequences of underestimating the quiet, observant, calculating person who had once loved him blindly. The psychological pressure intensified as Emma leveraged social proof, having friends and associates confirm inconsistencies and observations in a manner that Alex could not challenge, creating a network of indirect witnesses who validated his failures without her having to lift a finger. Indirect confrontation. Alex's confidence, the foundation of every relationship, every deal, every personal interaction, crumbled beneath the weight of his own exposed flaws. And Emma's revenge became not just a personal victory but a comprehensive dismantling of his identity, reputation, and social standing, executed with surgical precision and patience that left him broken and gasping for understanding. And through it all, Emma remained composed, walking the line between apparent forgiveness and unyielding control, never giving him a chance to recover, never allowing him to sense relief, letting humiliation, exposure, and psychological torment build to their inevitable peak, where every lie he had relied upon, every betrayal he had attempted, and every assumption he had made about her would collide into a singular, crushing reality that left him powerless, ashamed, and entirely at her mercy. Finally, after weeks of invisible manipulation, orchestrated exposure, and psychological warfare, Alex found himself isolated, doubted by friends, challenged by colleagues, and humiliated before the very social and professional circles he had once dominated. And in that silence, Emma approached, not with rage but with the calm dignity of someone who had been patient for months, the quiet satisfaction of victory reflected in her eyes, the culmination of every careful, deliberate step she had taken to dismantle the life of a man who thought himself untouchable. The realization settling over Alex like a cold wave that his life, his pride, his carefully constructed persona, and even the love he once believed he commanded, had been fully, utterly, and irrevocably reclaimed by the woman he had underestimated in every conceivable way. Alex sank into the shadows of their once grand living room, the hum of the city below like a distant reminder of a life that no longer existed for him. And for the first time, he understood the magnitude of underestimating Emma, the patient, calculated, unyielding force who had quietly orchestrated the collapse of everything he held dear. Every friend who had once smiled at him with admiration now looked with skepticism. Every business partner who had trusted his judgment now questioned his competence, and every lie he thought hidden was now exposed in perfect clarity. A reflection of his own arrogance turned against him with merciless precision. Emma walked past him with the same calm grace she had maintained for months, her eyes steady, unyielding, every step deliberate. A measured demonstration of control that left Alex frozen, unable to speak, unable to even formulate the words for the apology he wished he could offer, knowing deep down that nothing he could say would ever undo the months of careful, deliberate dismantling he had brought upon himself. She had removed him from every sphere of influence he had ever held, socially, professionally, emotionally, leaving him isolated in a world he had once dominated, and the weight of that reality crushed him more than any confrontation or accusation could, for this was the revenge he had never anticipated, the invisible, perfect, total reclamation of power by the one person he had thought powerless. Over the following days, Emma executed the final stages of her strategy, ensuring that Alex could not escape the consequences of his actions. She arranged meetings with lawyers to quietly restructure financial holdings, subtly removed him from boards, redirected accounts, and ensured that the other woman's involvement was documented in a way that reflected poorly on him, not her, leaving Alex exposed to both legal and social ramifications he could neither prevent nor negotiate, a perfect blend of justice and poetic irony. She even reconnected with friends and allies he had manipulated, carefully orchestrating their loyalty, ensuring that every attempt at reclaiming trust or authority he might make was met with skepticism or outright denial, leaving him scrambling and powerless while she remained composed, untouchable, the architect of his complete unraveling. Emma's final act of confrontation was not dramatic, not loud, but cinematic in its subtlety. She presented him with undeniable evidence of every betrayal, every lie, every manipulation, along with the consequences he had triggered, each moment of humiliation and exposure strategically timed to maximize impact. And as Alex absorbed the full scope of his ruin, his pride shattered irreparably, he understood the depth of her intellect, patience, and strategic genius. realizing too late that the woman he had tried to control, cheat, and manipulate had been planning this meticulous destruction all along. She gave him no chance to argue, no opportunity to manipulate the narrative, no space to regain dignity. The totality of her planning left him defenseless, humbled, and fully at her mercy, and in that silence, she allowed him to experience the full psychological weight of his mistakes, the realization that every action he had taken against trust, loyalty, and love had been repurposed into instruments of his own undoing. And then came the personal reckoning. Emma allowed Alex to confront the woman from his affair, not with anger or threat, but with controlled exposure, arranging a meeting where Alex saw firsthand the consequences of his deceit, the humiliation amplified by her calm presence, and for the first time, he truly felt powerless, stripped of the charm, confidence, and authority he had relied upon for years, replaced by the stark reality of his own failure and the devastating mastery of Emma's revenge. The social fallout was complete. Colleagues, friends, and acquaintances who had once admired Alex now viewed him with doubt, suspicion, and disappointment, and every attempt he made to reclaim credibility only revealed further cracks, each one a testament to Emma's patient orchestration, each failure a reflection of his own underestimation of her intellect and resolve. Emma's victory was quiet, dignified, and absolute. She had dismantled a man who believed himself untouchable without raising her voice, without public shaming, but with the precision of careful observation, strategic manipulation, and unyielding patience, demonstrating a mastery of control, perception, and timing that left Alex not just defeated, but broken in a way that ensured he could never reclaim his former power or pride. In the aftermath, Emma restored her life, not with vengeance for the sake of cruelty, but with calculated clarity, reclaiming financial control, social standing, and emotional autonomy, while Alex existed as a cautionary example of the consequences of betrayal and underestimating someone he had assumed submissive, proving that patience and intelligence wielded quietly can exact a far more devastating toll than rage ever could. And as she looked out over the city from their once shared balcony, watching the lights shimmer against the darkness, Emma allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction, knowing that the months of planning, observation, and subtle manipulation had culminated in the perfect execution of justice. A triumph achieved not through force but through brilliance, strategy, and an unshakable calm that made every prior insult, betrayal, and deceit turn inward upon him like a weapon. The psychological and social dismantling of Alex was complete. The man who once believed he could control everyone around him now understood the ultimate truth. The most dangerous person is often the one who quietly observes, waits, and acts when the time is perfect. And in that revelation, Emma's power was absolute, her revenge complete, leaving Alex with nothing but the echoes of his own failures, the realization of misjudgment, and the stark, unalterable consequences of his arrogance. And so, as the story closes, remember, trust, betrayal, and patience are forces far stronger than anger or immediate retaliation. And sometimes the quietest, calmest presence in your life may be the one who holds the most control, patiently waiting for the moment to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more intense, cinematic tales like this, because every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of silent revenge deserves to be experienced in full.